me
Yeah.
introduce Julia to Eric and Eric to Julia, almost in real life. And I have known Julia for about 6 years now, coming up on 6 years. And I've known Eric for about 20 years, although it was
23. Yeah.
it was toward, yeah, I mean, it hasn't been continuous. And I've long thought the French bring the best value to Pandas playing cello. I know you were surprised when we had Bryce Chalamel on, and maybe surprised that our circles had Venn diagrammed. But
You mean Brice. Yes.
Brice, is that how you say it? Brice?
Brice. Hmm.
Yes. So
Well, I would argue that at least our pronunciation will be better on this episode anytime we have a French person.
yes, exactly. And anyway, thank you so much for joining us. I don't know if you just started showing up in my algorithm on LinkedIn more often, or you began to post more often on LinkedIn, or a combination. But I noticed about a year ago that you were sharing really interesting things on LinkedIn.
Right?
Yes, and I've kind of I mean, really, really, really good. And I've identified some of the themes that you follow, or that I see.
Hmm.
AI human partnership, longevity, and kind of general health things. Is that fair?
Yes, I think it's fair. Look at me. I mean, I need to work on longevity. I'm not making any comment about anyone else, but mostly like healthy aging. You
Healthy
know,
aging, yes.
right. And one reason is that I was part of a biotech company, um, in the past 4 years, and it's an animal health, focused
Mm.
company. But the idea for me was to take what we learned from that and try to apply it to human health. Um, and so I got into, it's a probiotics and engineered bacteria. So we genetically modify bacteria to produce certain products, enzymes, proteins, peptides in the gut. Right. That's kind of that was the business for animal health. So livestock
Hmm.
and companion animals. Um, and some of the enzymes and some of the bacteria that we were working with had some effects on gut integrity, on inflammation, that I thought were very relevant to human health. And in particular, if you can reduce inflammation upstream, before it crosses into the bloodstream and then triggers all kinds of, immune, effects leading to, the well-known diseases of aging, diabetes, uh, liver disease, arthritis, and degenerative diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's. All these things are like, it's the accumulation over time of that low-grade inflammation. And so I thought, okay, look, first of all, it's very interesting. And we have an approach that is kind of unique of uh, preventing inflammation from crossing into the bloodstream and in improving gut integrity. And that has all kinds of consequences for, aging. And third, I thought it was very relevant to me. And although it's never too late to start, it's better to start early. So I can't say that I'm starting early, but I've, in the last couple of years, I've really been focusing on, how does that apply to me and things like that. But yeah, well, so that's the biotech
Right.
and and longevity aspect and biology and all these things I find very interesting. But it's like a continuum, right? I'm interested in science in general. and how AI is accelerating scientific discovery. And it's been, of course, it's been pretty amazing. Um, and I am on the amazing side, of the spectrum. I'm
What's the other
amazed.
side? The fearful side? What's the run
Yeah, well, I
away?
don't.
What's the other
Okay,
side? Run away as fast as you can?
if I wanted to go into the details, yeah, I would say, well, it's not a one-dimensional, continuum. It's many dimensions. But yeah, I would say that um, there's also the hype side.
Yes.
But there's the hype side, there's the fear side, there's the I mean, there's so many sides to it. But what I've been interested in for 30 years more is where do new ideas come from, and how can we come up with things that no one has ever thought of before? Um, is and I had been convinced until very, very recently, and right now I'm in a phase transition. I don't know what I believe anymore, but I always thought that you need to have a human brain in the loop to come up with something really uh, new, creative, and relevant. I mean, the relevant part is kind of important because like you can generate tons and tons and tons of stuff, like monkeys typing on a keyboard, but most of it will be irrelevant. Uh, and or you could even write things that make sense but are so not interesting, right? So the notion of taste, of interesting, of is that relevant to us? That's the thing where I thought, okay, well, you know what? I am Eric Bonabeau. I'm the world's foremost expert on what Eric Bonabeau likes. Okay, don't come and tell me what I like and what I don't like. Okay, so so I need to be in the loop, right? If I'm going to create something, if someone is going to create something really new and interesting and relevant to me, I better be in the loop. And I think, in general, when you look at all of the automation in science, it's the problem that AI is generating a lot of things. Well, some is wrong, but even the things that are not wrong, they're not interesting. And I think that's one aspect of it. It's like, how do you really recognize what matters? Um,
You're
not
making
everything
me
is.
you're making me wonder, because uh like you, like Julia, I saw the beginning of the internet and in the beginning of the app economy. It was once called that. That was a term. And it made me think of what percentage of all apps still exist, because these apps all were built, or not all, but almost all of them were built. I'll amend that again. Many of them were built to cater to some particular interest or need that the developer thought people had. And, anecdotally, I would say 90% of them, I would go, well, this is stupid. And then I would move on. Would you agree, Julia?
Um, yeah, but I also, yeah, for sure, almost objectively true. But
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, that's because they're just little seeds. I mean, it's just, this is the deal with creativity, right? I mean, if you're asking the question about how do we think, where did, new ideas come from? They come from these little seeds. And sometimes I mean, I think, and you could argue now is one of those times in the history of human culture that we create the seeds as much as we create the plant that they grow into. And so other people get to see the seeds. And it's just sort of, it's messier. You don't have a finished product as much. You have a lot of the process of the product being sold as a product. And that's kind of cool because they're little seeds for other ideas, better ideas, or ideas that are going to solve other problems, or just, let's say, more unusual, more fitting ideas for the situation. So I feel like that's where the new ideas come from seeds that don't necessarily make sense and don't necessarily come to anything other than being a seed. So, yeah.
Well, okay. Let me push back on this. Because I think talking about seeds is almost like talking about panspermia, right? That panspermia is this theory that life on Earth began because like a seed from space arrived on Earth and life started. Okay, I mean I think it's pretty debunked, but uh,
Could totally be true. Probably
uh,
not just one seed though.
well, okay,
I mean,
well, a few seeds.
little those little tardigrades can, clip themselves to the size of the International Space Station. So already
Right,
we
right.
have an example of something like that. So yeah.
Tardigrade, even though they're old and very sturdy, they were not alive. I mean, they did not exist, 2 billion years ago. So it's
I'm just saying they're an example of a form. Like it's to me, life will out. Life will find a way and get itself around. And so they're just an example. I'm not saying
well,
tardigrades started it all. But I mean, if there could be that seed, there could be another
that
seed.
that that would be the conspiracy theory of the century. Tardigrade studied it all. Wow. But I mean, my pushback is really on, okay, well, where does the seed come from then? I mean, I think that's the point, right? I mean, like, if there is a seed, and then there are lots of seeds, and some grow and some don't grow, and it's based on taste, it's based on what people want in the case of apps, right? Uh, and by the way, as a small digression, I would say that today, if you look at, I'm in a state of what I call, it's a very recent state, maybe a couple of weeks. I'm in Claude Flow. I don't mean to be, I don't mean to be mean to Brace, but that's what I've been, focused on. Claude Code is just a game changer. And I'm in Claude Flow, and I can create any app that I want that is for me. No one else will like or use that app. I mean, I don't know. I hope not. But that's the idea that okay, I can create, and then I'm the tastemaker in Bonobo world. So anyway, that's the small digression. But back to the seeds. The seeds are there and they grow, they don't grow. There's this taste feedback. But where did the seed come from? And I think that's the question that I've been interested in for a long time. Is what where does that even come from? And I it's that's it. I think it's an unsolved question, and it's coming back to the forefront now and then. Yeah, and there was an article recently that I thought like a little article from maybe 1 or 2 days ago that about um, you know Einstein coming up with theory of relativity, and the fact that he needed to accept you need to take something that was considered a measurement error and say actually if it's not a measurement error and it's actually because it was a very consistent measurement error. So, like, when something, you know, occurs over and over and over again, maybe it's not a measurement error. Maybe it's actually you
It's an
know,
anomaly that needs to be described
Well,
better in
it's
exactly.
theory.
It's
an
Yeah,
important variable that you were not measuring, that you had
right.
not taken into account.
right.
Like Thomas
Okay.
Kuhn writes about
Mhm.
structure of scientific revolutions, and what drives the new revolution is an anomaly that keeps occurring. So it's no longer anomalous in certain situations. And that's what Einstein did, is said, now I'm going to, do a scientific revolution with this new theory. Yeah, it's very
I
powerful.
I don't know how Einstein thought about it, but he definitely said, okay, well, I think it's a it's a nice repackaging of Einstein. Okay, what I'm talking about here, but it's really okay. This thing, you know, is it's not what we're expecting, must be a measurement error. I mean, physicists typically say that. I mean, like not theoretical physicists, but so
Well,
and so he
theoretical
said, okay,
physicists say that all the time.
um,
That it might be a measurement
yeah,
error. In fact, they
oh,
would
okay,
prefer
actually,
that
you're right.
if it's yeah, if they would prefer that if it's their theory that's on the line, they wouldn't like it to be a measurement error.
Yeah, yeah. So, and the idea that, the speed of light is always the same, no matter what from anywhere. And, and even if you're moving, the speed of light is still there. It's just that, like, okay, Einstein said, okay, if that's the truth, then what do you need for that to be true, right? What is the framework that you need for that to be true? And to had to construct something that was like, it was not a shuffling of existing building blocks of Newtonian physics. Okay, it had to be something very different. It had to it had to start from a completely different framework. And I'm sure at the time Einstein was considered an alien by people who were in that space, in that field. Uh, and so the question is, where does that seed come from? Because there's the recognition there's an anomaly, and that maybe that anomaly is the truth, right? It's not a mistake, it's not an error, it's not a small thing. It's the truth. Uh, but then there's like, okay, well, how do you now, come up with an explanation for that? Because it flew in the face of everything that people thought they knew at the time. Um,
So
you
that's
know, the,
one, so I'm very curious because that's one class of new idea. You're motivated to create a new idea based on something that you observe. So in the world of science, that's one way that new discoveries happen. Other
Mhm.
ways, if we even just stick to the world of science, there's other ways that new discoveries happen. And sometimes it's literally something pops into your head and you're like, holy cow, I never thought of that. Let me test that out. So it's like driven by the new idea first, and then, you are given instructions from whatever source of how to test that idea. And I've done both of those things in my life as a scientist. They feel very different, but they're the same kind of, it's like you're starting at a different place, but it's still sort of the same out of the blue. Either I am out of the blue observing this anomaly, and now I am out of the blue trying to figure out what to do with it, versus I am out of the blue starting from square one, and I never thought of this before. And now I have to go find out about it. So that's just in the world of science. But I think those same kind of sort of different points on the creative pathway and starting there occur for artists or performers or problem solvers, even analysts, right? Anyone who has to use some neurons to figure out what's going on. And so the only differentiation is where in that pathway you sort of get the aha moment. But the aha moment is the thing that comes, quote, out of the blue. So I'm really with you on that being a mystery. Um, I'm not at all. I don't feel experience what you're saying as pushback. I feel it as support because a seed is just an
it's a
artifact.
mystery.
It's an artifact of the mysterious process. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So then I do not accept yeah, I do not accept the mystery. I mean, I accept mystery in general. I think that in the sense that there are things that are probably things that are unknowable, and it's totally acceptable to me. But it doesn't mean that I don't want to go further and try to know and understand. And that particular type of mystery, I think, is that's what's been driving me for a long time. And I love the example of artists because, yeah, I mean, like initially it was like, I need an operating theory of creativity that I can put into a computer, not for the computer to be creative, because for me, creativity is actually the intersection of a generative intelligence and the experience, the view of the human.
The observer.
It's the observer, I mean, I think, like in the eye of the beholder is, it's often taken as as something bad. I think it's wonderful. What Bonobo likes is very much in the eye of Bonobo.
Yeah, by necessity. And the eye of
Uh,
the beholder thing is very similar to what goes on in quantum mechanics, right? In the eye of the beholder is when the actual creative act of a measurement takes place.
um, so, so anyway, back to the question of, where does that come from? Where, so part of it is it a recombination of existing building blocks? It's one of the questions. And it turns out that this is a very ill-defined question because what is a building block? And what is a recommendation, in some way is actually better defined. There's a grammar for assembling and, manipulating building blocks, but what is a building block? Hmm. But anyway, let's assume that it's something that exists. Um,
Wait a minute, can I back up? When you say something
of
that
course.
exists,
Mhm.
yeah. Um, can you define thing? Does it have to be physical? And what is
No, no, no,
existing?
no, no, no. Of course, it doesn't have to be physical.
Okay.
Thing is, I mean, like if I have to explain, if we have to explain every term, then it turtles all the way down. So it's true that a lot of that stuff is only fine. But I mean, at some level, I know that in technology, for example, Brian Arthur has this book about the evolution of technology, where it basically shows that pretty much all of technology has been that kind of process of you know, recommendation of building blocks. And these building blocks form new, I mean, these recommendations form new building blocks that then enable, the next iteration, and you have
Those
more
building
complex
blocks
structure.
are right, but those building blocks are physical. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah, well, in that case, yes, it is, they're physical, but I mean, I think that, that's just one embodiment that I
So
think is
can we
very,
just quickly make it just so that I don't have to like sweat this? Can we just quickly make a definition of what thing existing is? What if we say like, would you agree with, because I think the whole thing I mean, this does a lot of heavy lifting, right? So if we're talking about the recombination hypothesis, and you're just saying that the building blocks are either things that exist in the physical world or ideas that are clearly delineated in the non-physical, in the mental space. If we can include both of those things, then let's say
Mhm.
that those are what we're talking about as building
Yes,
blocks.
yes,
Okay,
absolutely,
cool.
absolutely. But so in that category and it's a huge category and it's hugely relevant and it has led and is leading to and will lead to just amazing discoveries and amazing art and whatever. But you know it, in that category, it's still a category and there's something else. So let's start with that category, which is there are building blocks that are floating, and sometimes they're being recombined, and new building blocks, are defined from these combinations, and then they become the new level of abstraction, if you will, right? Um, so, because you could take a computer, or you could take it, again, physical object, because the metaphor is a lot easier, and you could decompose it to quarks, right? All the way down to quarks, but that's not the level of description that you want to be at, either. So all these levels of all these modules of meaning are
Stuff.
floating around
Yeah,
and
meaning.
and and that and then it's the zeitgeist, right, that you're floating in that zeitgeist, and for whatever reason, one day your brain responds to what you're being exposed to. It could be that you have a prepared mind, as Pasteur would say. And so, chance favors you and you see something, right? And you say, oh, this is how this building block should be
That's also a
should be
saying
put
in
together.
baseball. I think it was Branch Rickey who said, luck is the residue of design, which is
Ooh,
very similar to the prepared mind, I think. But
wow.
please proceed.
Yeah, I, you know, if you play games like poker, and I don't. I mean, I cannot. I But anyway, if you do that, you know what that means, right?
Right.
If you if you have something that's very well designed, then you have to accept that there are ups and downs, but eventually, chance will favor you, right? Um, so uh, and and by the way, I have this inversion of Pasteur, which is the prepared mind favors chance is what I say.
Mm.
Like
I like that.
if you if you if you've prepared your mind to be open, then you should like create some serendipity uh,
Right.
stuff in your life, and something will trigger this aha moment or this like things will happen. But it's not just like passive. Okay, I'm prepared. You have to be proactive in generating random encounters, right? Um, but anyway, so the point is that, in the combination of the zeitgeist, all these building blocks that are floating around, and they're relevant to the moment, and the reason why they're top of mind is because, they're cognitively available, is because you know, they're they're present today. People talk about them, or you've read an article about something, or so. Okay, and then pow, it triggers your like, oh, that's it. Um, and so I think this is very similar whether you're an inventor, a scientist, an artist, that like things like just make sense all of a sudden. And so, but the building blocks exist.
So one of my favorite counterfactual histories, and Julius heard this before, is how different would the world be if the Romans, or the Greeks for that matter, but the Romans were the great engineers, if the Romans had harnessed electricity. So if 2000 years ago the Romans had figured it out, and I mean, I think from what I know of Roman culture, society, economy, they could have, they just didn't have the right stew, that they didn't, the right, I think you used the phrase augmented serendipity
Yeah.
did not occur. But I like it because I think our history would be very different. Our world economy would be very different if the Romans had figured that out.
Absolutely. I
Okay. Wow.
It's one of my
so
favorite. I just love that. And the other thing I would say, just a couple of thoughts. I'm the non-scientist in the group, in case anyone's confused about that. But but like when I hear people talk about physics, what I'm thinking is, well, we're not done with physics. We probably haven't even really begun. I mean, maybe we're at the end of the beginning of physics. And I
we're
remember,
babies. We're babies with
yeah, and
physics.
I remember a decade or two ago when I became really interested in cosmology, and people would say, oh, the universe is X billion years old or that billion years old. And it struck me then that that is just the basis of that's just based on our technology. In other words, we say it's that many years old because that's only as far as we can see. And every time there's a new telescope goes up, we go, oh, correction. We can now see further, which has led, I'm full of little sayings. That's it. That's my intellect. And our ability to know is a function of our tools for knowing. This seems imminently obvious to me, although often when I say it, it's kind of like people go, oh, I've never thought of that before.
I
Go ahead.
I think that's exactly right. And if you look at, probably half of the Nobel Prizes that have been awarded in physics and chemistry, um, they have been about in biology, they have been about instruments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
You
that's
know,
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a
Seeing
great
things differently. Yeah.
factoid. Yeah.
yeah, that allow you to the instruments that allow you to to measure things in that were not within reach before. They were not measurable,
Yeah.
and so I think that it's very true. So new instruments and new instruments that might appear mystical today might
Right.
actually be the instruments that that will power the next wave of discoveries or
Exactly.
in
Yeah.
Well,
spirituality and
I want to say maybe they are mystical. So I feel like there's a thing that
Whatever
goes,
that might mean. I don't know. Maybe mystical
that's
is
what I'm saying.
basically the word that we're using to
Ex
describe the
yeah,
next jump in
that's right.
physics, right?
exactly. Exactly. That's the thing. I don't think that by continuing to perform science, we reduce the world to no mysticism. I think it's the opposite. We sort of start to understand that what we've been calling mystical can also be called by this other name, but it's still friggin' mystical. You know, I mean, like quantum mechanics is really mystical. Still, you know, even though we're starting to be able to understand pieces of it. So I keep having this question that arises. So your project of really trying to understand how new ideas happen.
Failed project, but yes, so far.
Of
Mhm.
course it's failed. I mean, people have been trying to figure this out forever. I mean, but like we could talk about it as a project, even if it doesn't.
Or I would be hosting this podcast with you on my yacht. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah, but but it's a project. If a project is worthwhile, it's going to be failed if you've only had one person in one lifetime to work on it. And you're not the only person who's worked on this. You know, thousands of
No.
years of philosophers think about this. But people keep coming up against this same problem, which is like, all right, if it's the recombination thing, then we have to have a name for the verb part, which is we have all these nouns floating around of building blocks, but there's
Hmm.
this verb part of putting them together, which is, of course, then we say a new idea has happened. And that verb part is what you're trying to explain. The building block stuff to me seems to be obvious and like doesn't get you anywhere because what you're really trying to describe is this activity. And it seems
Hmm.
to me the activity can't be well understood if you only presume that the building blocks have to be ideas that are in your conscious mind of which you are actually aware. So when we did the definition of building blocks before, and we talked about how, building blocks are things that ideas that you have clearly delineated or physical objects. And it seems to me like we have to change that definition if we
No,
want to
no, no,
get
no, no. No, I
just
mean,
let me finish this.
okay, go
That I think we need
ahead.
to change the definition for the building blocks to include ideas that aren't clearly delineated, that aren't in your conscious mind, and you have no friggin' clue, but they're processing unconsciously, and then they appear to your conscious mind, and that's part of the verb. I'm not saying that's the whole verb, but I think that's part of the verb, and we can't ignore that.
Um, so I mean, in my mind, the definition of the building block, um, is something that is defined in the soup of ideas and concepts that are floating around. Not necessarily in your mind, but
In
it's
all the
floating in some form.
minds, yeah.
You have to be somehow exposed to it in one way or another. Um,
But you have to be
Otherwise,
conscious of it in your conception. I feel like from what I'm,
no,
yeah, right. It
no.
could be, in fact, largely,
Mm-mm.
in my view, based on the way the brain works, 90% chance it's not going to be conscious.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, yes, I mean, I don't know what the percentage is, but I think that it's basically, these building blocks are ideas and concepts that are floating around, and you don't necessarily you don't know how to put a name on it, but at some point it's going to come to the forefront. It's like going to surface out of your subconscious, and I think that's the one of the things that what one of the many uh, ideas that came out of this project, as you call it, was something we call the hunch engine, like years ago. A hunch engine is it's like a search engine, but when you don't know what you're looking for,
Hmm.
so you can't put the idea or the concept into a search box. So that's almost 20 years old. Okay, so Google was the model for that. So like, hey, let's say you don't know what you're looking for. So how do you go about that? Um, and the idea there was, okay, you need to be exposed to some stimuli, and some of the stimuli will trigger a small signal, or if it's a big signal, then okay, fine, you're done. But if it's a small signal, but it has to be detectable, or you have to make assumptions about, okay, well, A, it's speaking out that it might be real, or it might be noise, but it might be real. And then when you see this signal, when you detect that signal, you said, okay, I'm going to reinforce, the stimuli that led to that signal, and I'm going to like modify them and recombine them, and then see if that triggers a stronger signal. And the idea was like, I want to be able to surface what is hidden, potentially very deep. And the only way to do that is to actually expose you to this stimuli and see what happens. Of course, cannot be random, because if you do a random walk in the space of stimuli, whoa, you're not done. So, that was the idea of the hunch engine, that where you amplify the little signals, in response to the stimuli, see if there's a there. So I think it kind of resonates with your idea that, hey, it's all in a lot of it is in our subconscious. I absolutely agree with that. In fact, okay, I don't, okay, you'll
Wait, could
hate
I
me for
ask a
bringing
question
up,
about,
I
wait,
want to bring up Rumsfeld in a minute. Okay, go ahead.
I don't, no one's gonna hate you for that because we all love the unknown unknowns. That's really real. But in terms of the hunch engine, this is so intriguing and so similar to a GPT I built that I call a Socratic engine, which is all about
Mhm.
getting you to like build your intuition based on questions. I can we dive a little deeper on the hunch engine? I mean, who ended up with that? Where does it exist now? And do you at some point in the hunch engine process, after being sort of I'm imagining the user saying, okay, this stimulus, there's something there, but not this stimulus. And so you're drilling down into some kind of a little like a local, minimum of energy or maximum, depending on how you're thinking about that. And then does the user report out loud, okay, I have this insight. It's my question is about this, or my hunch is about this, or do they report to themselves, or is there a group of people who are doing this who are experts in a particular area and they're all talking to each other? So together you're getting the full picture of the hunch, like a bunch of blind men and the elephant. Like this is exciting. How does this work?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would say the answer is all of the above, depending on the use case. Sometimes you don't even need to understand why you reacted to something. It's just like, and I'll give you an example of that, but in just a few seconds. But I want to bring Rumsfeld to still, because it is
It's
Rumsfeld
great.
itself is not relevant to the hunch engine, but is, as you know, is two by two matrix is, and you have the known knowns and the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. Don't you feel like there's something missing in this quadrant?
Well, he had the
Yes.
unknown knowns.
Yeah, but that no one has ever really developed on that. It's like the known knowns and the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. What are the unknown knowns? The unknown knowns are exactly what I was trying to describe. That is like in the soup of things that are floating around. There is knowledge. I mean, but you don't know that you know that,
Right.
right?
Right.
And
That's
the
the
only
problem of the
way
unconscious. Yeah.
the only way to surface that knowledge, right, is to expose you to certain stimuli.
But wait,
You
that's
know,
you've said that now 3 times, and I gotta say I don't totally agree that's the only way to surface the knowledge. That is one way to surface the knowledge that totally would work, especially if it's a priority that someone else gets aware of what's going on in your mind and what your known unknowns are or your unknown knowns. But but
That's so hard to do, to tell another at least personally, this has been my experience.
mhm.
To get someone to actually get close to understanding what's going on in
Oh,
my mind. Oh my God.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's like
Yeah,
the problem.
but the thing is, in some ways it doesn't matter. And let me tell you why. But yes, I totally agree with that with you, Carmen, on that. And I was reading about something fascinating recently called the history of emotions. You know, about how hard it is to put yourself in the shoes of people who lived, 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and really have a sense of how they felt, what emotions they had, given the context in which they lived and operated. So I'm like, and I think it's true at this level too. I don't know how you feel, even, I don't know how my kids feel. I mean, they tell me something, but, I don't know. Like I have an 8 year old, right? But yesterday it was super bored and it's like crying hysterically because it was bored. And I was really upset that it was crying and complaining that we didn't give him anything interesting to do, or and I'm thinking, you're lucky I love you.
Well, he's entertaining
Uh,
himself with his emotions, so that's good.
well, it was definitely entertaining us with his emotions, I guess. I mean, keeping us busy. And you know, I don't know how he feels. Maybe it's very painful for him, and it's expressing that pain with his cries. It's like, okay, and I was kind of like debriefing yesterday evening, thinking about, okay, what happened here, and I thought, wow, it's almost like he's an 8 year old or something. Oh man. So anyway, so back to the stimuli. I think that the stimuli could be deliberate. You're stimulating the person with something, and um, that is uh, geared toward a goal.
Right? I
All
mean,
right.
that's cognitive warfare.
Well, okay.
Well, no,
Well,
I
let me
mean, I'm not saying that's the only.
let
I'm
me
not saying
give
that.
you an
Just to be clear, I'm not saying that the hunch engine is cognitive warfare. I'm really excited about the hunch engine. What I'm saying is that using stimuli to move someone's unknown stuff
yeah.
towards a particular goal is the sort of act that cognitive warfare does. But I'm not. I'm on your
Right.
side.
No, but so I think that you could have like a deliberate stimulation that basically is trying to get to that point, uh uh but I'm going to give you an example of that, which is really not cognitive. I mean, might be actually when I think about it, but at some point you were asking where's the hunch engine? Well, for about 8 years or so, it was like one of the top baby name finders, in the world.
Mm.
It was the, website of the year, Time Magazine website of the year in 2008.
Oh,
And it doesn't exist anymore. But I think about, like, close to 1 billion babies were named using that tool. And that's an
wow.
example of, well, I don't know what I'm looking for. I mean, I'm looking for a baby name, obviously, but I don't know. I don't know, but and then there's the Porter Stewart, theory of porn, or vulgarity, or whatever that comes into it. Porn. Yeah.
The
It's like
recognition.
I know it when I see it.
Yeah,
Okay. So I don't know what I'm looking for,
yeah.
but I know it when I see it. And so that's the idea is, okay, we're going to show you 16 baby names, and you're going to tell me, which ones you think that you prefer, that you like better, or dislike more. That by the way, that's another thing. Like, oh, Henry. I had a Henry in high school who was a bully, and I can't stand that name. Okay. Uh, so and so if there is a little signal here, very quickly, that was the beauty of it. By under, that you could find related names to the ones that they seem to like better. Uh,
Have you vibe
and
coded this up now so that you have a
I
new
could
version?
well, I'm done with. I mean, I have four, so I don't need more babies.
No, but not,
Um,
I mean, for like, so the intelligence community, for instance, people have hunches they don't even know they have hunches, right? What
yeah,
if,
well,
could you vibe code up a version for the
mhm.
intelligence community where people would be like,
Let
I
me
have this thing that's nagging at me. help me figure it out.
Let me give you an
Yeah.
example of what happens when you didn't know you had a hunch, at least I think. So, and this happens occasionally to me. Something happens which is a surprise to everyone, but the first words out of your mouth are, "Oh, I knew that." But you can't go back. You can't pull the thread backwards and go, "Why did I say I knew that?" But it's clear that you said that and you felt that. Oh, I knew
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Well, you felt that, or because in hindsight is it's very natural to single out one variable among the billions of variables that were available back then. So I don't, but yeah, sometimes you feel that like, but it's more like you had the intuition, you didn't act on it, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, no, but there's something there because I mean, usually I'm genuinely surprised. I'm going, "Wow, where did that come from?" But every once in a while, I have this very
Mhm.
strong feeling of I felt that coming.
And it's not, and so Carmen, you're separating that from sort of a self-justification. Like you're like you actually
Yes,
did your report about it actually reflects something that you actually felt at the time.
yes,
And
yeah,
this is why Freud said there's different levels of the unconscious mind, right? And so things that are sort of bubbling up very close to the surface would be in like preconscious or subconscious, and then you have like the deep wide unconscious and then the collective unconscious. And so it's like because something that's just close to the surface, you could almost recognize as I almost was conscious of that. Like
yes.
almost there's a sense of familiarity,
Yes,
of a
I think that's
deja
a
vu.
really good way of characterizing it. I was almost conscious of that. Another day or two, it would have poked through like a little plant.
Yeah. And so I feel
Oh,
like this tool, Eric, that you're going to make, I'm very
yeah.
excited about it, is
Oh,
going to help
I'm
folks.
going to make. Okay.
All right. Well,
I mean, look, it's
as always, I'm the timekeeper, and we've got about 10 minutes left in our hour, and we have a secret question I really want to ask you, Eric. So
okay, but
finish your
yeah.
train of thought as you wish.
Yes,
Okay.
my train of thought um, is
Choo choo.
um, okay. Please don't derail it.
Very nice.
Uh,
Very, very nice.
um, so I think this yeah that and by the way I've done a lot of work for you know intelligence community and you know and others and yeah, that was a very people were very interested in it. And and for whatever reasons, some people were very interested in it were fired. One died, so it didn't
Yeah.
actually take off. It's like it's crazy. It's a crazy story. But anyway, um, and one example of work we did for ONR. Also 15 years ago was like
The Office
having
of
a feed.
Naval
Oh,
Research
sorry,
or
Office of Naval Research.
yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
It was a feedback loop where you're trying to capture uh, what happens in the brain, and it turned out that there's this team in Oregon, Don Tucker and Fan Lu, that discovered that you can detect a signal from an EEG, uh, apparatus before the person is conscious of it. And in fact, sometimes you detect it even if the person does not ever become conscious of it. And so the idea was to present images of, the skies and say, hey, is there an aircraft in there?
Or a
And doing a
UFO.
feedback loop. Okay, well, it was aircraft and it was a proof of concept, so it's like, you know, but so that was the idea. It's the hunch engine basically picking up the signal, didn't even ask you to verbalize what you were saying or to be conscious of your decisions. It's just like,
Oh
okay, oh
my
wow, there's a
God.
little spike here, and then there's a feedback loop, and it's zeroing in on the image that triggered that signal and trying to apply a filter to it so that maybe you can extract the salient features and show it back to you and say, hey, is something there? Anyway, but these are deliberate stimuli. Yeah, it's a deliberate stimulation with a purpose, right? Uh, but there are, I mean, there's this guy, Anil Seth, that you may know, right? You may know of. Uh, a very interesting, neurobiologist of consciousness, I guess. And he has been working on, the dream machine. The dream machine is, Brian Geisen, the famous or infamous, Beat Generation, uh, poet, artist, I don't know. But the idea is you just stimulate someone with stroboscopic light, and crazy, amazing things happen. Uh, I would say 90% of the reports are that people are in the same state that they would be with, mushrooms,
That's the
right?
basic report is that gecko go into a psychedelic insight. Yeah.
And second, like insight, there is insight.
Yeah.
And if you could get that kind of introspection, without resorting to chemistry. I mean, it's chemistry of the brain, so it's still chemistry, but it's not external chemistry; it's internal chemistry. With this kind of apparatus, I think that it's not a deliberate. I mean, it's deliberate in the sense that hey, you're doing that, but it's not deliberate with respect to a goal,
It's
right?
like feeding your brain. It's not
Yeah.
showing your brain. Yeah.
Well, it's like shocking your brain a little bit, like like hey, let's bring
I
some
don't
noise
prefer
here.
the term shocking because that
Okay,
sounds
okay,
aggressive, but like
fine.
it's activating your brain.
It's activating your brain. It's really a form of the prepared mind favors chance, where you feel like you're prepared, you're everything, but the pieces don't fit together. So why don't we just like shake? Well, wait, shake, this concept machine of yours. Oh, and maybe some of the pieces will fit together. That will be the beginning of a percolation of concepts that will come together and form the full picture. And I think that's where that's one of the things I find fascinating right now, that what are the interventions that are non-chemical? I mean, chemical interventions are very interesting too. I mean, I don't get me wrong, but that are non-chemical and that could actually give you access to parts of your brain that are really not accessible otherwise.
Hmm.
All right, and I'll
Well,
stop
and they don't
there.
have to be visual. They can be audio. In fact,
Oh, absolutely. Oh, the
music and
combination.
drumming was the original intervention. And by the
Yeah.
way, music entrains more of the cortex than the visual stimuli do. So the visual stimuli are there because culturally we are a visual people and we believe something's happening more. But the auditory piece is, sorry,
Uh,
it's in charge.
no, no, absolutely. I completely agree in fact, I think it's multisensorial. I mean, I've been
Of
also
course.
interested in, I mean, I'm even by French standards, I'm obsessed with food, and you know, I even managed to sell a food printer for long-term space missions to NASA, right?
Oh,
So
cool.
so I was interested in, all of the stimuli that you can put in the mouth that like can also give you access to parts of your brain that are inaccessible. So anyway, yes, I completely agree with you. I think it's multisensorial. Uh, anyway, Carmen, you have
Well,
a secret
yeah, well,
question?
I mean, I had written down a
The
bunch of
answer is
things that
yes.
we're not going to get to.
Mhm.
I was looking at some of your previous posts on LinkedIn, and you wrote quite recently that you felt that all the pieces were finally coming together. And I don't know if it was about innovation or human progress. And I wrote down, this is not the question I'm going to ask you because this would have to be another episode. Are all the pieces finally coming together, or do we just have more pieces now than we've had previously? And I would suspect it's the latter, that we're still missing pieces. But the question I want to ask you is totally unrelated to that. But if you want to respond to that, please do.
No.
No, okay. So
I don't remember. I'm not sure what it applied to. I think it,
yeah, yeah, I didn't write it down. So we've been asking people this question, and you've got four kids, and I think your youngest is eight?
no, six.
Six. Oh,
I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I have two 25-year-olds.
I know. And
Mhm.
so Well, I didn't know, but I gathered that there was a break because I remember when I knew you 20 years ago that he had kids. So
Mm.
my question is, and we've been asking people, what are your favorite books to read to your kids? Not necessarily the books they like most, but the ones that you like to read to them. And they obviously they can be French
Huh.
or English or whatever language. And we've been getting some really fun answers. So we've been asking our guests who have kids that question.
Uh, okay, that's going to be a very boring answer. I like to read books that they enjoy. And it's a very circular answer because they like to listen to books that I read to them or that we read to them. So I don't know. I enjoy the reactions. I mean that actually that's the thing that I enjoy the most. It's like, okay, there's the book without the book without pictures. They love to read it. They love for me to read it because it's a book where you have to read everything. I mean, obviously, and there are no pictures. It's like, wow, how can that be? A book without pictures, it's boring. Um, but no, because it makes you say things that are silly. So, I think the book I enjoy reading them is the ones that they really,
Yeah, they love.
respond to.
Yeah. Any
It's not,
difference now that you've got two generations? Has there been any difference in between the reaction of the two generations?
I don't
You
know.
don't know?
No,
That's
I
good.
don't, I, I don't. Hmm. No, I think they're, no, actually, I do know now. I remember some. I had to, get out of my subconscious
Yeah.
some examples, and now I remember a few scenes from a long time ago. And no, they react like kids.
Yeah, that's
Um,
great.
I mean, the one difference is that they spend so much time on screens nowadays that there were no
Mm,
screens 25 years ago.
right.
Yeah. That explains the crying when bored
Yes,
because it's
actually,
really withdrawal.
it's a good
Yes. Oh
explanation.
my gosh.
Well,
Uh,
Eric, clearly we just pricked the surface uh,
Ouch.
of what I knew we could chat with you about, and
Mhm.
I'm very happy to talk to you again after all these years.
Yeah, it's good to see
Yeah,
you. So
yeah,
yeah.
where are you based, Julia? Where are you based?
I'm in Virginia,
Okay.
near where Carmen's Virginia house is. Right now
Okay.
she's in her Texas home. I wanted to say I really love this conversation and thanks for being willing to
Thank you.
engage on every level